I left where the TSE is staging the vote count, and they actually just held a press conference there where they decided to pause the vote count. So that was a little odd. They said that they want to make sure that the count is clear and that there aren't any issues, but they actually haven't been they haven't been counting for very long. The count only began at 5 p.m. and that was just counting the exterior vote. So that was strange. Here, what happened was that some of the people in the area from some of the buildings were making some noise, doing a pot banging sort of protest, and people, I guess the police and the campaign felt as if they were going to come and attack the building, the movement towards socialism building here. So the police is actually here. There's also riot police to both sides of us, and there's a lot of press out here waiting for Luis Arce, representatives of the campaign, to come out and speak. Evo Morales, if you've seen the tweets, he just did a series of tweets where he denounced how strange it is that at 8 p.m. today, as I was talking about earlier, we were supposed to be receiving at least 2 of those private exit polls. And those exit polls were going to be aired on national television and give us a little bit of an idea of what people were saying as they voted today. But those have been delayed. There's a lot of buildup to those polls, and now it is 9:30. So it's an hour and a half, and we haven't received those numbers to my knowledge. And so people are starting to wonder if the numbers are being cooked up. What is it that is being hidden that those results, which are so easy to calculate, have not been published on national television yet? And he's also denounced once again that at the 11th hour, they scrapped that rapid count, unofficial quick count system, and is still asking questions about why that is.
Camila, the president of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal you mentioned before, Salvador Romero, he did have a conference. He spoke about today being a successful day for democracy, but he was asked several times by many different journalists about the declaration of results, and he wasn't quite clear on when this would be. As a matter of fact, some would say he was a bit evasive.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, the votes have always been kind of slow to come in. I think it's not rare for it to take 3 days for us to get, a final picture of what 3 or 4 days, if you count this evening, what the result is going to be. And I think a lot of people are willing to wait for that result because, of course, we know that, it's been a long time coming for this election, and we want to make sure that everyone's vote counts, the electoral observers that are from the campaigns and from here in Bolivia, but also the international observers, also want to make sure that a thorough and complete job is done, and also that it's obviously fair and transparent. But I think the strange part was the press conference that happened just now. I'll have to look back at it again because it took place as I was arriving here, but they did decide to pause the vote counting. It could resume in the next little while, but I think, if the mass is as far ahead as they believe they are, then it won't take long for us to begin to get a picture of that through these exit polls, through the exterior vote, which we know that they'll perform quite well, but even just through initial results. If even in the very initial official results from here in Bolivia, the map does well in areas where perhaps Carlos Mesa was expected to do well, that could become as quite a shock to the right wing here, and we might, get some sort of a hunch as to what's to come.
You mentioned earlier that Evo Morales had tweeted denouncing the delay in showing some of the results on national television and so forth. But Salvador Romero, he had called on leaders of political parties to continue to be patient. He urged citizens to continue to be patient as well. I mean, what sort of difference do you see in the feel in terms of being around people on the ground after he declared or decided to announce that they would be pausing counting of the ballots and resume early in the morning?
Well, I believe that, like a lot of the people who were there at that vote counting, where the vote counting is taking place are international observers, and some of them are just trying to wrap their heads around whether this is normal. Why is the vote counting stopping at 9 p.m.? It went really late into the night last year. So I do think it's going to raise a lot of questions. People are not out and about, as we've spoken about earlier. You're not really supposed to be circulating. There's no vehicle circulation. All stores and restaurants have to be closed. But people are waiting anxiously in their homes and watching television and on social media, trying to, see what results they can get before they head to bed. And I think that, this is only going to make people even more apprehensive about what's going on. And it just seems as if things are being paused or delayed deliberately.
Okay, that's a good point, because it begs the question, with election observers, international election observers coming into Bolivia to participate in these polls. I mean, of course, some of them would have limited budgets. You mentioned people like organizations like Code Pink and so forth. Do you think that this is sort of a tactic to sort of thin out the number of observers that are present?
That's definitely a possibility. I mean, obviously, some people, quit their day jobs. People who serve as international electoral observers are, come from all different sorts of backgrounds, be it politicians or some sort of grassroots organizers or working for NGOs, for example. And they do come here for a very short period of time. That's something that I've been very weary of. I made a point to come here very early to touch base with, the team here, a permanent La Paz team headed by our correspondent Evo Morales, to try to kind of feel out the situation here before these elections. And I had intended to stay far beyond, election day as well. It is a concern that they'll be rushing to write a report in the coming days, and that they'll be leaving by the week's end, and we don't know when we'll be getting some sort of result. And it is really difficult with the environment, the media environment here in Bolivia. I can tell you, just the people standing around right now are part of the mainstream right-wing pro-coup media. They are aligned with the regime, and they're out here and expected to report and tell us truthfully what is going on here if something were to happen to the Casa Campania of the MAS. But we don't know if they're going to tell us what's actually going on. That's the reason why I left where I was and I came here, because things will happen here and it won't come on the news. All you see on the news right now in Bolivia, if you're at home, including state television, is propaganda and so-called analysts and people telling us that on Bolivia TV, Bolivia television, of course, state TV of Bolivia, there were people speaking, analyzing the situation with no official results, because there was no official data at that point. And they had said that they don't know anything, they don't have any official results, but that somehow they knew that the vote was 4 percentage points away. That's impossible to know for anyone. How would anyone know that if localities and departments hadn't even computed their official results, much less would we have a national picture? So they've been saying things like this all along. They've been using these pre-election surveys, voter intention survey polls, to try to convince everyone that we're going to a second round, that the MAS doesn't have enough support to win in one go. And now they are speculating for hours and hours live on air about what the outcome could be, as people sit in their home at the edge of their seat trying to get a little bit of information about what the future holds and if democracy is going to be restored in this country. So it is a very tense situation, and these people are largely, these press members of the press are largely responsible for this massive disinformation campaign here in Bolivia.
What can we expect to see for the rest of this week?
Well, it's just going to be more of this. It's going to be a lot of stakeouts. We are waiting to see if we can hear something. If we can see something from Luis Arce. We hear that perhaps President Evo Morales in Buenos Aires might have something to say. We want to see where they stand when everything seems a little bit irregular, and the system that we were told was, flawless and fixed from last year, even though to our knowledge it didn't have any issues. The issues were all falsified and generated from the U.S. State Department and the OAS, quite frankly. We're now they've told us is a flawless system, but things aren't moving very quickly, and we don't have a lot of answers. So I think people are going to start speculating a little more, and things could get even more tense. And I'm speaking from the perspective of La Paz. We also have to look at what's going on around the country, how the vote count is taking place there. Of course, remember that the TSE decided that the military would be, or they would be using, heavily armed vehicles, military grade vehicles, I'm not sure, to transport the electoral material from one place to another. These are the same people that the regime had put on campaign clothing to campaign for Carlos Mesa.